Good morning, CJ. A high-energy start to the day as Clinton supporters cheered Hillary and Bill on. County Executive Rob Astorino, who's raised 3 babies of his own, says it's not always that simple. Now, a Con Edison worker says it could have been lightning that downed the tree, but no one knows for sure. That despite the complaints, relationships between police and community are at an all-time high. Doctors say you should have at least 1 ounce for your whole body. That's the size of a shot glass. Says the best way to check for oak wilt is to look at the leaves. You'll see that it'll start browning around the edges first and then head toward the middle. They were overcome by emotion to see an entire auditorium with all eyes on Eli. Once the crew isolated the water break and shut the valve off, it was just a matter of letting the pressure build back up again. More than just bouncing around to make it to the big times. Governor Andrew Cuomo ramping up security here at JFK and all the New York airports for that matter. It's a busy day here today as we head into the weekend, and the people that I spoke to shared a sense of anxiety in light of recent attacks. If you didn't get to hug somebody for a National Hug a Newsperson Day, here are all the things you can celebrate today. Crews have been out here through the night and into this morning trying to make those necessary repairs here at the site of the wreckage. Here's what he told me we can expect at the reunion. People will be stopping to look at it as we get a little bit closer to it. Traffic does slow down just a little bit, and we'll also be able to see where the construction workers are starting to try to repair that. And while the jury's still out on whether town locals and visitors actually believe this is one of the most boring towns in America, either way, having your town listed on a top 10 can be anything but boring. In Pelham Manor, Rose Itzcovitz, FiOS 1 News.
38%. That's the number of sudden infant deaths determined to be caused by unsafe sleep environments since 2008. Taking action against this, Westchester County Executive Rob Astorino is launching the Safe Sleep campaign across the county. FiOS 1's Rose Itzcovitz has the details.
8 months ago, baby Daniel was welcomed into the world by new parents Oscar Bravo and Bruni Garcia. But the new bundle of joy brought new anxieties.
My main concern, if my baby can choke at night, maybe I can be sleeping.
The parents lost sleep constantly checking on Daniel. That's why they were happy to offer their son up as the new poster child to Westchester's Safe Sleep campaign, to bring information and awareness to new parents on unsafe sleep environments that can cause infant deaths. County Executive Rob Astorino launched the initiative. Joined by the family, as well as pediatrician Jennifer Cantor, they introduced the ABCs. At night, babies should be alone, on their backs, and in the crib. Tummy time should be supervised, and all pillows and stuffed animals should be kept out during sleep time.
Parenting's hard. We are not perfect. But this is such a simple concept, to have a baby alone on a back in a crib. So when we see a fatality where unsafe sleep was the reason for the fatality, it's very tragic.
According to the New York State Department of Health, there are about 90 sleep-related infant deaths each year across the state of New York. That's why Astorino hopes that campaigning by video, county bus shelter, and bus car ads, the number will fall even if just by 1. And while it may seem easy and even obvious to just put the baby in the crib on his back, County Executive Rob Astorino, who's raised 3 babies of his own, says it's not always that simple.
The easiest thing when the baby is crying is to just try to make the baby comfortable. You think that's the best thing to do. And so if the baby is on his or her stomach and all of a sudden starts to go to sleep, you're like, oh, I did it. I'm going to sleep.
The takeaway? It's better to bite the bullet and turn the baby over. More helpful information and details on the ABCs can be found at westchestergov.com. In White Plains, Rose Itzcovitz, FiOS 1 News. Good morning, CJ. A high-energy start to the day as Clinton supporters cheered Hillary and Bill on as they returned home bright and early to cast their vote for the next president of the United States. Even though Hillary Clinton arrived at the polling place just after 7 a.m. to vote for herself, it was still later than expected, which gave her supporters ample time to assemble and pump themselves up.
Thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you. You bet, with your help.
So, what's it like to vote for yourself to be the next president of the United States? According to Clinton, it's humbling.
So many people are counting on the outcome of this election, what it means for our country, and I'll do the very best I can if I'm fortunate enough to win today.
Her neighbors are just a few of those counting on the outcome of this election. I caught up with them again a half-mile down the road where the group Chappaqua Friends of Hillary encouraged their kids to write letters to Clinton.
I guess if they want to write a letter to Trump, they can. This is We're mainly focusing on Hillary today because she's such a good advocate for families and children.
Dawn Greenberg, the group's founder, says involving the next generation is what it's all about.
Letting the kids know what a big deal this is and celebrating. This is a big moment in our town. God willing, it goes our way.
In fact, group member Samantha Holzman says Clinton's setting a new norm for her daughter Charlotte.
She sees a woman, accomplishing that goal that she might not have thought was possible for her in the past.
I really want to be president.
And one day, she just may be. But as for whether she'll be the first or next Madam President, that will be determined later on today. For FiOS 1 News, I'm Rose Itzcovitz in Chappaqua. This year's U.S. Olympic gymnastics team has been crushing the competition, and the budding gymnasts in Westchester are firing up to get there in the future. Do you watch the Olympics right now?
Yeah, I watch it a lot. Yes, I do watch it.
You do? And what's your favorite thing to watch?
I think it's floor, because that's my favorite event. And they do lots of flips, and I like watching it. I want to go to the Olympics when I grow up.
Actually, many of these rising stars hope to make it to the Olympics one day. So I asked the coaches what it takes. And I found out it takes a little more than just bouncing around to make it to the big times.
All body conditioning. It means stomach, back, arms, legs, everything. Every single muscle have to be stronger and have to react fast.
And Coach Zatulska should know. An elite gymnast growing up in the Ukraine, she almost made it to the Olympics. But sometimes even putting your all into it isn't enough.
We can help them with their gymnastics, but they need to have the heart in order to get that far.
And speaking of having heart, once I heard there's an Olympic gymnast competing in her 40s, I thought I still have a few good years left and decided to start training. And then I decided to stop training. Best to leave it to the stars. And of course, the future stars. In Westchester, Rose Itzcovitz, FiOS 1 News.
I have a 34-year-old daughter who got married a year ago, and she moved back to Pelham with her husband, and she said, I'll never move back to Pelham, it's so boring.
Though Ermeli's daughter may have had a change in heart, she wasn't alone in calling Pelham Manor boring. The website areavibes.com, a site that mathematically determines the best places to live in America, says it used complex data and algorithms to determine the nation's most boring places to live. And as it turns out, Pelham Manor ended up in the top 10. But residents and frequenters disagree with that.
For me, it's not boring because I'm always out, I'm always working, I'm always interacting with people.
Now, while the authors of this study say that they used science and data to determine the results, the following caveats should be kept in mind. The authors say they considered factors that they generally think makes a place exciting, meaning that while they assure the readers they didn't base what's boring on their own personal opinions, they themselves came up with factors like over 35 years old is more boring, and a population with a higher percentage of married couples is more boring. Even more boring, married with children. But Pelham Manor resident Ermeli says she's too busy to keep up with herself.
I go to the gym, I go to play tennis, I have a knitting group, I have a walking group.
And while the jury's still out on whether town locals and visitors actually believe this is one of the most boring towns in America, either way, having your town listed on a top 10 can be anything but boring. In Pelham Manor, Rose Itzcovitz, FiOS 1 News.
One of America's most prestigious international horse jumping events is underway right here in the lower Hudson Valley. FiOS 1's Rose Itzcovitz tells us what we should watch out for this weekend at the 46th Annual American Gold Cup.
Everyone treats their horses differently. For me, my horses are my best friends, and so I think it takes a little while to really develop a relationship with a horse.
Adrian Sternlicht has a new best friend. Tulago, an 11-year-old Oldenburg gelding, just joined her 2 months ago from Europe, and Sternlicht's still learning his quirks.
He has a big white eye, which is unusual, so sometimes it looks like he's giving you a side eye. And he's a very big horse. He's long and lean, and so I'm a small girl, and so it's taken me a little while to learn how to package him together.
And for Sternlicht, an amateur competing with equestrians best of the best at this year's American Gold Cup in North Salem, an international show jumping event, that becomes a hurdle. other than the ones she and Tulago will be jumping this weekend. She'll be competing with the likes of two-time Olympic gold medalist McLean Warren. Fresh off a silver at this year's Rio competition, McLean looks forward to competing against pros and up-and-comers like Sternlicht. And he's also happy to be back on his old stomping grounds.
It's important to have events like this and have the community support them, that they can to stay financially viable and continue to keep this as part of the community, because that's why we all moved here.
County Executive Rob Astorino also encouraged competitors and spectators to keep the economy thriving up north by suggesting taking the kids apple picking and then bringing them to this event.
Bring the apples here. Don't feed the horses, and just have a great time. So, in other words, spend your money here in Westchester.
Today's top 40 competitors will move on to Sunday's marquee event, the $216,000 Longines FEI World Cup. But it's not just the pros who can participate. People who like to ride as a hobby and so-called weekend warriors will also compete in their own divisions, proving it's never too late to get back on that horse. In North Salem, Rose Itzcovitz, FiOS 1 News. The calls came in before 3 a.m. A few hours later, Yorktown officials found the source to people's complaints of no running water.
It's a 12-inch main. Because of that size and the magnitude of the blowout that we had, it affected the whole town.
But Yorktown's water superintendent David Rambo says some areas were worse off than others.
When a water break occurred, all the water came out of that hole, so it lowered the pressure and the water elevation in the tanks, and people on higher elevations were without water for a period of time.
Once the crew isolated the water break and shut the valve off, it was just a matter of letting the pressure build back up again. So Rambo says the whole town had water again within an hour of them finding the problem. But the water is still very low pressure at the moment and discolored.
Yesterday it started getting a little bit brown. I thought it was brown, very slight, and I thought maybe it's my imagination. But this morning it was brown.
Marie Martinez says she took the brown in stride and bought bottled water.
To make coffee and to give water to the dog.
And even though it looks like they've dug themselves into quite a large hole, literally, Rambo says that everything will be cleaned up and back to normal in just a few hours.
Once we expose the main, then it's quick. I hear the saw running right now. They'll cut out a section of pipe, replace a 10-foot section, and then we'll be back in business.
In Yorktown Heights, Rose Itzcovitz, FiOS 1 News.
But the neighborhood's changing, and it's well, that was a whole building just coming down. The whole facade just went down with a bulldozer. So as I said, the neighborhood's changing.
We caught Angie Pawinski witnessing firsthand this makeover on Main Street. The bulldozing of buildings is part of an almost $200 million project to build an apartment complex. And with those new homes will come higher prices.
The average rental price is, of a certain amount, so anyone that can afford it is going to be a certain type of person.
By a certain type of person, he means richer. And for Main Street store owners like Entima Brokwa who want to bring in more business, that's good news. But Yonkers residents who say they're getting pushed out due to raising rent prices throughout the neighborhood are not as happy.
They're throwing up these buildings, these condos that are so, with the rents so sky high, and destroying affordable housing. I don't see how that's helping Yonkers in any way.
Jay Mora constantly struggles to make ends meet. While the prices in his neighborhood are rising, his salary of $8 an hour stays the same. But even worse, he says the beautification of the city brings more racial profiling by the police.
Now you get harassed just by being there because of the commercialization of the buildings, the restaurants. It's like they want to keep out certain minorities.
Now, the mayor's office declined to comment on the neighborhood's rising rent prices, but in regards to the racial profiling, the communications director did say that despite the complaints, relationships between police and community are at an all-time high. That's the latest here in downtown Yonkers. Rose Itzcovitz, FiOS 1 News.